Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. And if you've been wondering, what does it take to make it in corporate America these days, you're in the right place. Also, now that I've been talking with our guest backstage before the show, actually, we'll be talking about what does it take to make it in life these days, particularly in our sort of pandemic, post-pandemic. We're not sure where we are in the pandemic world. Chances are the way you've always done things isn't going to get you where you want to go. And the way we've experienced the pandemic and the changes in our lives have definitely shaped us and impacted who we are and how we show up. Much has changed, good or bad, over the last 2 years. Yet, we still see some inherent challenges in getting ahead in corporate and our lives, and most of these challenges are embedded in people's belief systems. And now is a very exciting time. We're on the brink of authoring in a new era, a new time, and a new way of being, both at work and in our personal lives. So if you're ready to discover how you can author the future you want, come on in, say hi, don't be shy, ask your questions. We welcome your comments. We definitely want to welcome you to the show. So say hi and say where you're from. And if you've never seen my smiling face before, my name is Erin Urban, or Coach E Urban. And you can find out more about me at coacheurban.com and more about my work with high-performing leaders and teams to elevate impact. And don't forget to subscribe to the Career Coffee Chat podcast on your favorite podcast provider, or check out my YouTube channel and access all the upcoming live streams, the podcast, and any live stream replays. You get all the goodies in one place. Today, I am very excited to hear what life coach Genesis Amaris Kemp has to say about overcoming challenges and letting go of that which does not serve you in order to thrive. Now, the author of the book, Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, From the Pit to the Palace, Genesis is here to share with us all about her experiences. She's a podcast host of Gems with Genesis, and she's a firecracker and a mindset hacker. Forced to be reckoned with, she's not afraid to speak up and challenge the status quo. And I want to give a big round of welcome and applause to Genesis. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Erin. It is a pleasure and honor to hold space with another fellow podcaster.
Absolutely. Us podcasters got to stick together. Some folks tuning in here today going to say hi to, and I am not good with names, so we're going to say Shash. Hi, Shash. Good to see you. I'm blaming that all on my grandfather. So true story. My name was going to be, get it, Elspeth. Yeah. Woo. And my grandfather would never be able to pronounce it. So my mother named me Erin instead. You got to run with it. We'll roll with the show. Great to see you, Patrick, tuning in. And good to see you, Tio, as well, tuning in this morning. Now, Genesis, I have a question for you. You're an authoress yourself. And clearly you had some sort of catalyst that happened in your life to get you to author that book. You want to share with us a little bit about what went on to help you author Chocolate Drop in Corporate America?
Yeah, so I'll just hold up the book cover for those who are watching. So that's Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, From the Pit to the Palace. You see the world in the background showing that these issues don't just happen in America, but they happen worldwide. There is diversity on the cover of the book. There's different people from career professions as well as ethnicities. And then From the Pit to the Palace, that's just very important. And the reason why I say from the pit to the palace is because in life, we all go through various tests and trials. And it's those tests and trials that produce our testimony, or the hell of the mess that we go through produces our message for us to curate where we're going. And it's like we're lighting a torch in order to help other people light their torches and really create, metaphorically speaking, a wildfire. And what really launched me to writing the book was a day of frustration, to be honest. Had no idea I was going to write.
Those days where it's just like, I'm going to write a book about this.
had no idea, Erin, that I was even going to pen a book. My background's corporate, so I've worked in corporate America for 15 years. 12 of those years were in the oil and gas and energy sector.
Mm-hmm.
So the good old boys club, very male dominated, ran by Caucasian males, and me being a chocolate drop, even though I am first generation American, my dad was from Curacao, so part of the ABC Islands, for those of you listening, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, and my mom is West Indian from St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Mm-hmm.
I saw my parents come to this country and have to, work twice as hard because of the way they looked, even though my family is very mixed and diverse. And whenever I was faced with racism in the work setting of all places, I was like, wait, this doesn't exist because I've never been treated
Right.
differently outside. But it wasn't until I had a stint in the chemical plant where I was a RMC, so a raw material coordinator for polypropylene, which is a form of plastics. And people are like, what gives you the authority to be here? Or you don't know what you're talking about, or etc. And I was like, well, maybe it's my degree that I got at school, supply chain and logistics and technology,
Mm-hmm.
with double minors in purchasing and organizational leadership and supervision. It is my numbers of experience, not just working in the chemical sector, but I started my career in drilling, so upstream,
Mm-hmm.
and then I transitioned to chemicals. But before that, I had other jobs such as real estate, where I was a personal assistant. Then I worked at the cancer center for a little bit. So even though my career path has been non-traditional, you can't tell me the experiences that I gain elsewhere does not mesh over to what I'm doing now. And as long as you know your work scope and etc., you should be talked to with respect. They should have empathy, they should have compassion, because at the end of the day, we're all working for the same corporation in order to get the job done in a timely and efficient manner. And last time I checked, I wasn't the CEO, you're not the CEO, and we're never going to be the CEO. So why can't we put aside our differences and look at the commonalities to come together? And I say all this to say is I didn't always end up at the top of the top totem pole. I started over twice, Aaron, in my career.
Mm-hmm.
My first entry into oil and gas, I started as an imaging clerk, believe it or not. All I would do was scan papers all day long. And I love to be transparent. I fell asleep at work one day. Just the papers were in the machine. It was like, "Ear," and I was just asleep. It was so boring. And that's when I quickly learned that not everything is going to be given to you on a silver platter. You have to take ownership of your career. So what does that look like? You ask Genesis. That looks like you beginning to network, not just internally within your group, but externally with other groups, building those rapport, seeing how you can help. How can you get your base job done, but how can you get stretch opportunities done? Which allowed me to move into project coordination and management. Then from there, I became an HSC manager. So that's health, safety, and environmental. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was capped out. I was young. I'm still young. I'm only in my early 30s, so you can imagine all this experience that I have. So I was like, okay, I'm at the top of my salary cap. There's nowhere else I can go. So why not start looking for something else? Which segued me into a Fortune 500 company, which is how the book started brewing. So I tell people, metaphorically speaking, the baby inside of me was going through a conception phase, but it wasn't ready to be birthed yet. And when I interviewed for this company, I had 3 job offers. The job offer I went with was the lowest paying one. Why did I do that? I wasn't crazy, y'all. I did it because this company was branded by association, and I was thinking about the longevity and the sustainability with this company. And
Mm-hmm.
hindsight 2020 is amazing because all the other companies that I said no to went under during the pandemic, but this
Mm.
company is still around. They may not be on the S&P 500 anymore, but their name still carries weight depending on who you're talking to. So I took a lower role as an administrative assistant, which was a big going from a manager to an
Oh,
administrative
that's a
assistant.
big shift, right? How did they even accept you into that role? Because what we find typically is when professionals want to pivot, and let's just say, oh gosh, I really want to start over, or I really love this company, or whatever it is. And then they want to maybe open themselves up to taking a lesser role. Oftentimes, hiring managers won't even give them the time of the day because they figure, well, you're just going to look for another job very quickly because you won't be happy doing something else. How did you get past that hurdle?
So, how I got past it was the fact I wasn't happy and I wanted a technical role, but at the time I didn't have my degree yet. And I got up to the manager level at the old company because I knew the right people. They also knew my work ethics, and then I did a lot of OTJ on the job training, which gave me that ability. But since I was going into a Fortune 500 company and I was competing with other people who actually had their degree already, because I was still in school at the time, and I went to school at night while working full time. So had two
Mm.
things that I was juggling. And I was like, okay, I kind of see it from their point of view. But then there was a part of me that still felt angry because I had already called out um, all their offshore stuff, because I have to talk in layman terms because it was proprietary. And so I knew all about their offshore assets and et cetera. And they're like, wow, how do you know this? And I was like, well, I was the lady on the other side writing your topside level one inspection report, talking about how you need to protect the risers, talking about what type of protection do you need for corrosion and et cetera. And they were blown away by that. And I thought that would have set me apart, but obviously it didn't. So what I did was I had to humble myself and take that role. I stayed in that role for 4.5 years, which was a long time. It felt like forever.
That is a really long time. Yeah.
Then I quickly applied the same things that I did with the smaller company. I started networking. I started going to different nonprofit events that the company would sponsor, because there's
Mhm.
different like agencies like United Way, Junior Achievement, and etc. that they partnered with. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? I know the company pays for us to volunteer with this organization. I'm going to volunteer, and then I'm going to get visibility to see other people throughout the company that's at these events, which is what I did. And that definitely helped me, because it was one lady that I met there who ended up working in the chemical plant. And it so happened that she was retiring and she remembered me. So she put my name in the bucket. And that's how I got my first professional role as a RMC, raw material coordinator. So it's not always what you know. Sometimes it's who you know or who knows
Mhm.
you, in order to give you the leverage where they're mentioning your name in rooms that you may not have been afforded the opportunity to go into. Then I did that for 11 months. My life changed because my now husband had proposed to me at the time, and I wasn't willing to commute a total of 4 hours. I was commuting from like one city all the way to another, and the other city is like Baytown. So let's just use Houston to Baytown, for example, which, with traffic, and if any one of you has ever been to Houston, I-10 traffic with all those 18 wheelers at certain times of the day is brutal.
Yes. In fact, I used to commute when I first moved to Houston. I didn't know. I didn't know anything better. So I just picked a spot in Sugarland. And I spent 2 hours one way every day, so a total of 4 hours, just driving into Houston and driving out of Houston at about 10 mile an hour pace into Houston and out of Houston every day. And I decided that the best thing for me to do is sell the house at Sugarland, which was at a downturn at the time, so that was not a profit, and then actually rent a place inside of Houston at a much higher rent rate just because yeah, I just didn't want to deal with the drive. And at that time, that was before the revitalization of Inside the Loop, and you could still get a place for under $1,000. Now that's not necessarily the case. So, Jensen, tell me, you mentioned a little bit about, the importance of cross-functionally networking, because we
Mhm.
hear the word networking, and then usually what comes to mind is going to some sort of event and schlepping out business cards or holding up your phone and going, connect with me, here's my scan, because we don't want to touch people these days. But regardless of how you want to do that, or worse, getting on some sort of Zoom session, which, by the way, doesn't work at all. I can go into reasons why it doesn't work. It just does not work, okay? Because people don't really form connections until there's a one-on-one connection. So one-on-one with somebody like this, great. You're meeting via Zoom one-on-one, perfect. Otherwise, very difficult. So, cross-functionally networking. And you mentioned, those people go bad for you, basically, if you're not necessarily in the room.
Yeah. So whenever those people go to bat for you, what does that look like? That person is now putting their neck on the line, metaphorically speaking, and talking you up to contributors that have power in order
Mhm.
to make things happen. So they may have a higher classification level, which is what you'll hear me later on in the conversation talk about CL when I get more into the book. They may be managers, or they may be direct reports, meaning they don't have any team members under them.
Mhm.
So they're a manager, but no one to do any performance reviews or etc. So that's what I mean by going to bat for you, because they already know you enough
Mhm.
based on what they've seen outside of the work setting, and then now they're pairing it with what they've seen in the work setting. And I tell people, whenever you are in a work setting, it's so important for you to be mindful of where you are, how you show up, whether it's how you dress, because they're already sizing you up in the room. How do you carry yourself? Are you a go getter? Do you go the extra mile? Are you getting your base job done and doing more on top of that? Because even though you may not think someone is watching, let me be the first one to say they're always watching you, even though you may not think it. And that can leave an impression on somebody else, because I've had people say, "Oh, you're Genesis, da da da. I've seen you over here." And I had no idea who the person was, but they were behind the scenes already checking me out.
I'd like
And
to add too, for those people who feel like they always have to go above and beyond. And this is particularly true for the women that I coach. I coach high achieving women. And women, we feel like we have to go above and beyond. Although I would have to say that a lot of people feel like they have to work hard, right? Success comes as a result of hard work. That is, in fact, not true. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do good work. However, if you, how can I say, overachieve, so you try to do too much and try to be too good, then you become irreplaceable. And that's a big problem.
oh yeah.
Most of the subject matter experts that I coach, they can't move because their boss has put them in a nice little hole and wants to keep them there because that they make them look good, right? And so that becomes a big problem. So we don't want to necessarily be too good at something and then become stuck doing whatever that is. The other challenge I see is that people don't articulate their goals to that cross functional network. So that cross functional network doesn't even know how to help support them if an opportunity comes up. They just think, well, my work should speak for itself, when in fact it does not, right? We do.
Yeah. I could totally resonate with what you said, because I've been in both of those predicaments, Aaron. I've been in my last role, I was doing trade regulations and compliance coordination for another commodity, which is polyethylene. Polyethylene is a form of plastics. So I managed three global distributors and one freight forwarder. And since I was the only one doing that role, it was the first time the company had ever created it. So when I wanted to go from chemicals back to upstream where I started my career, my supervisor would not let me go, because I was the only
Mm,
one doing the work. And it made her job easier, because she didn't have to micromanage me. She didn't have to tell me on how to, get certain things done. I was flying to meet, the vendors by myself. I was representing the company in C-suite meetings and etc. So you don't need to handhold me or spoon feed me. But what I had to do was, I was like, okay, I have to handle her like a long handle wooden spoon. So who do I know that has influential power in a management role that gets invited to performance development summaries and assessment, that can vouch for me, so
mhm,
I could use that as leverage in order to get out of this role or get my
mhm,
name out there.
mhm.
And
Right.
it's not always about being conniving, it's about being strategic. And my older brother, who's an engineer, he always told me it's like playing chess. And at first,
It is. It is. Yeah.
I didn't understand that, but I had to do that. So one of my experiences was I got to travel with a direct report. He was an older Caucasian male, and he's like, "Wow, you really know your stuff for only being in this role for a short amount of time." And he's like, "I'm gonna go talk to XYZ, to see about getting you a salary treatment and about your career, because I was already telling my supervisor that I wanted to move on to something else, but she just
Right.
wasn't hearing it because I made
Mhm.
her job comfortable. So,
Absolutely. You made her life easier. You made her look good. And this happens, by the way, for those of you tuning in an hour later, it happens all the time. In fact, around 20% of the clients I coach in career advancement strategy, this is a similar story that I hear. I have these skills, and it's clear. I mean, it's obvious skills and credentials and expertise, but their bosses are keeping a lid on them because they make them look good, make their job easier. So they don't want these individuals to go somewhere else. And what happens? Well, they leave. And that's why all companies need to be more proactive about understanding their talent and their talent's needs. And that's a big gap. And one of the reasons why we're seeing the great resignation right now, anyway, to be honest, is because leaders are just elbowing down on people, making them work harder and stay in these little roles and not allowing them to flourish.
absolutely. And that's where the power of ERGs come in. So, employee
Mhm.
resource groups, that could
Yeah.
be like your COE, your center of expertise, or your center of excellence, where you begin to network within that group. And then you begin to talk about your career aspirations, because believe it or not, some of those people are managers, but they're going there to see who's interested in doing something outside of their role. And we also had a lunch with leaders segment for a while. So I would sign up to have lunch with various leaders so I could get to ask their brain, but then it's not just picking their brain, because I tell people don't just pick my brain, pick a price package. And I begin to say, okay, this is how you're adding value to the organization, but this is also how I'm adding value. And this is how we can streamline it in order to create synergies. And from there, some of those leaders started to invite me to certain things that I wouldn't have been invited to, like golf tournaments. We all know the men like to get out and, hit the ball on the green. But how many times do women get invited to go to different golf tournaments and
Not
etc.?
very often. That's true. That's true. Yeah. And fortunately, over the last couple of years, there have been a lot of shifts in that. So now there's more heightened awareness. Does that mean we're going to snap the fingers and changes are going to happen? No, unfortunately not. And I will say that shifts are happening. As long as we keep standing up and speaking out and sharing our voice about what needs to shift, the paradigm has to shift. Quite frankly, the way corporate America has been run up until very recently just does not work. It never has, but people put up with it because they had to. And I'll get off that soapbox now. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So a little while ago, you mentioned, someone going to bat for you at these meetings. So for those of you tuning in an hour later, if you're wondering what these types of meetings are, I'll share with you because I do coach executive clients who talk about this sort of thing all the time. They say you would like to think that is some sort of lovely process, like, oh, I get a promotion or a salary raise because of my wonderful achievements, right? Yes and
Yeah.
no. Yeah, kind of. So what actually happens, and not all companies to be fair, but quite a few of them, unfortunately, is managers of a certain level get around a table, a conference room, and then they start basically bidding
Mhm.
on who will get salary raises and who won't, and who will be promoted and who won't, because there's a finite level of resources. And so they're all bidding, going to bat for these resources, and those resources being money, cash, or opportunities. So having someone there to go to bat for you is very important. However, that person can't do it if they don't know what you want to do. So sharing your goals, aspirations, like you did, Genesis, with these lunch with leaders is very, very important. And you also did something else brilliant. You also shared what the business case benefits will be for getting you into certain types of positions and leveraging your strengths and expertise. This is another big gap a lot of people miss. They miss this opportunity and they don't connect the dots. They look at it from a one sided perspective. I want more salary. I want a promotion. Yes, and it's an agreement between you and the business. You get a promotion, you get a salary, and you're delivering something for the company. What is that? And can you articulate it? That's very important. So you did a brilliant job with that.
Absolutely. And one of my methods I share is whenever I talk with my coaching clients on mindset hacking, it's like do a SWOT analysis that's personal to you and
Mhm.
then pair that with the company's values and missions because that's where the value is going to be added. You're adding value to the corporation, but the corporation is also in a line to make money. So where does their profit needs lie? And
Mhm.
how can you add value there in order for the company to see a ROI, a return on their
Right.
investment?
Right.
Because if you're investing in them, they need to be investing in you, especially if they want you to stay because you may be that 1%, you may be that high which is high potential or high flyer that is soaring the career ladder, but the minute they lose you, then it's going to cost them more money to bring in a new set of eyes to train them because we all know how much it costs to do T&D, training and development, and that person doesn't know the company system and protocols like you do. So does it really make sense for them to just give you some more money here to keep you, or does it make more sense for them to spend X amount of money training a new individual and waiting for that individual to get up to speed to see if they're even going to perform optimally?
I'd love to hear from those of you either tuning now or later what questions you have. And if you've ever been in a position where you're like, oh man, I really did kind of work myself into a sweet spot that I couldn't get out of because my boss just saw that I was doing a really great job and I didn't necessarily self advocate. I'd love to hear from any of you tuning in now or later if that resonates with you and or what experiences you've had to shift maybe yourself out of feeling stuck where you are in your career.
hmm And I think mindset is a big component. And I
Hmm.
tell people if you don't know who you are personally and professionally, you're going to fall victim to what other people make you feel like you are. So stop allowing yourself to remain complacent. Stop being in imposter syndrome and stop feeling as if you're not good enough when in actuality, depending on what company you work at, their slogan may be we hire the best of the best. So if you're the best of the best, why not act like it? Have confidence. Do your due diligence. Always research your company's policies, procedures, learn new technology, build on personal growth and development, and then also research your competitors. So if something is not going right, you can make a solid exit plan strategy so you could begin to navigate how you are going to jump ship. But I always tell people don't drop a bone to pick up a shadow. Be strategic. If you are wanting to leave that company or corporation, have something else that is already lined up. Whether you're going to another corporation, what are they offering you? Because the grass may not always be greener on the other side. Or if you're going from an employee to the B bucket, a business bucket, and you're tapping into entrepreneurship, understand you definitely have to have a paradigm shift and you're definitely going to have to partner your zone of genius with other people's zone of genius because when you make that transition, you begin working in your business, not necessarily on your business, and the money is not always going to come in flourishing without you having the right mindset and having a steady foundation. So those are just some practical tips that I have used and I've helped my clients to. And then also be mindful of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because even though those words are thrown around loosely, those words is what's getting some of these companies funded. Because we've seen a lot of companies since the pandemic started and since certain movements happened, like the Black Lives Matter movement, the Stop Asian Hate, and then Me Too is making another full circle. We've seen where companies don't want to lose profit, so they're doing what they need to in order to save face and build in certain policies and
Yeah,
procedures.
I'd like to touch on that too, because that's my big concern is they're just saving face. Okay. So over the last couple of years, like I mentioned earlier, we've seen some very positive shifts as far as DE&I, better inclusion, elevating the conversation. And what I'm concerned about is this, and because I've seen it, call me a cynic, but I've seen it before, and I want to keep a positive mindset as well. So trying to hold the balance, if you will. I'm just a little bit concerned that some companies, as soon as it seems like it's safe to do so, will just let these things fall by the wayside. And here's the thing. The reason we have a great resignation right now is because in 2020 is what I call the great reflection. For the first time in a lot of people's lives, they had to wake up. They had to pause. They had to reflect, whether they liked it or not. And as a result of that reflection, most people did not like what they saw. Then people started voting with their feet. I don't like where I'm at for whatever reason. Let me leave. Now, some people did not do the due diligence you mentioned earlier as far as understanding, is this next leap going to serve me or sabotage me long term? Is it a good culture? Am I leaving a toxic culture for another toxic culture? Are they really taking off? Is their runway fairly long? Or are they actually landing that plane? Because of this, we're seeing a little bit of boomerang right now. People are like, oh, that didn't work out the way I planned. Let me go do a 180 and come back. So, yeah, it's a lot of things going on right now, but I'm really concerned that there may be more lip service.
Yeah. I could validate that because, for example, there's a particular company, and I'm not going to name drop. They got this money for DEI and B, and then they turn around and laid off a lot of their minority talent pool. So, did you really get the money because you were trying to save face, or did you get the money to keep certain things afloat because you know the state that your business was in during the pandemic? And if you were truly concerned about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, what does a succession plan look like for your minority talent pool? Are you just hiring them to be token holders or placeholders to show your shareholders how diverse you are, how inclusive you are,
Yeah.
how there's equity, and how those people could be feel belong? But if those individuals are conveying to you that they're not happy, they're not satisfied, why can't we just really have a transparent conversation where the people at the top who are influential can meet the people at the bottom, and we could begin to close the gap together by really collaborating and engaging in those difficult yet courageous conversations to see, okay, where are their gaps? Where are their inefficiencies? Does this person that I put in this role, is this the best candidate for the role? Is this the position that this individual wants to be in? How can we shift things? Are we out in the community giving money to certain organizations that represent this cause? Are we out in different schools that are hiring diverse talent because they're the best one in their class and we know how they could help our business and etc.? We have to go beyond the surface level and really start to dig deep and ask ourselves those hard questions. If we're not willing to look ourselves in the mirror, like MJ says, I'm looking for the man in the mirror. If we're not willing to do that, then we are missing the mark. And we have to sit down at the table together, put aside our differences and look at what the commonalities are. What are the common interests and how can we go further and faster together? Because Rome wasn't built in a day and neither was this organization. But if you are losing these people based on attrition or based on how these individuals are feeling, I suggest you really have some exit interviews. Understand that. I suggest that you start to really ramp up your initiatives. Don't just put your money where your mouth is. Walk it out. Let your action speak for itself. You can say things all day long till you're black and blue, but if those actions do not line up accordingly, then that's just lip service, like Aaron said.
Yes,
Also,
absolutely.
when something happens and you have the power of being a CEO, get up there and have a talk where you can acknowledge it, like a town hall or something. Say, I can't understand what some of the Asian employees are going through, or the Blacks or African American employees, but I am here to listen and I have an open door policy where I'm going to do my best to understand what's going on, and if I'm not the right person, then I'm going to bring in an outside consultant or a subject matter expert to help us have a effective and fluid conversation in order to bridge the gap. But silence is just as bad as not speaking up. And I always tell people I may not know the right things to say, but I will put a disclaimer out there and say I am not privy and well versed in this subject, but based on my personal viewpoints, this is what I'm going to do. And please stand with me and educate me so I could do a better job in this area. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this, Aaron, my sister's kids are half white. My brother's kids are half Indian. And my other brother, his daughter is truly African American. And my parents are non American. So we are a very multicultural and diverse family. And whenever I see someone treating my nieces and nephews differently because of the color of their skin, they didn't ask to be here and they didn't ask to be born to certain parents, but they are. That makes me wonder. And if they're going through that at a young age, we are not even scratching the surface.
Hmm. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Sorry, I just get really passionate.
No, no, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your passion. I think you're preaching to the choir too here quite a bit. I mean, it's great for us to say they should do this and they should do that. And the truth is, all true change starts with the individuals. I, who's listening to this podcast, who's listening to the live stream, who's listening to the replay, wants to make a difference. What does that look like? And that's where it starts, because with executives that I coach, and this is something we call the success paradigm. Okay. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter if they're Indian CEOs. It doesn't matter if they're from Germany. It doesn't matter if they're from South America, okay, or if they're white Caucasian males. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're a woman. It doesn't matter if they're a man. It doesn't matter if they don't identify. Okay. There's something called the success paradigm, and the success paradigm is something that's inherent in all human beings. What happens is, when a person reaches a certain level in their career, let's just say they are a CEO, wildly successful, they figure that their actions up to that point, right, wrong, or indifferent, have led them to that success. Right? And then they, by default, ignore anything else that may be better. They can be improved. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we see people and we're scratching our heads going, why are they making these decisions? Like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, can't they see the economic changes? Or don't they know there's a pandemic? Or can't they see what the actions, like they just laid off how many diverse people? I mean, they say they're DEI and B, but clearly not, because their actions say otherwise. Can't they see this? That's why. It's because their actions up to that point, they feel validated their success, and they hold on to those actions even if they're absolutely incorrect. Most of the people are successful in spite of themselves.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So where does the change begin? Well, it would be great for us to say, hey, CEO, hey, next in line for CEO, you need to change. Mm-hmm. Where the change truly begins is with you and I, with emerging leaders. Emerging leaders are more readily open. They're more accessible. They listen more, and they also know that they don't have it all figured out. Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean overnight we will see a change? No, it won't. And it means if we're intentional about this, we will see a change. And probably a lot sooner than you realize, because there's my generation that nobody talks about us. Gen Xers, we don't exist. I mean, it's like baby boomers, they're most of the way out, and then everybody else. But nobody talks about Gen X. So they're soon to be everybody in millennials or identifies with that are going to be making decisions. So let's then have that conversation, right?
Yeah. And we have to stop rewarding bad leadership, because if we keep seeing other people who aren't doing a great job in leadership get rewarded, that's also painting a image out there that it's okay for this type of behavior to be condoned. So we have to hold these leaders accountable. And sometimes the way that we can hold people accountable is to hit them where it hurts, their pocketbook. You don't have to be nasty, snarly, or whatnot, but let's talk about money with them. And if they start to see that they're losing money, that's going to make them wake up.
Well, they
And
are losing money because people are leaving.
yeah.
And in fact, I did some data research last year. Okay, what's driving the Great Resignation? People said, by a vast majority, I'm leaving toxic work culture. Okay, what's driving that toxic work culture? Poor leadership.
Yeah.
That's what the data said. And I did an actual study on that. And so, yeah, it's already hitting them. And people are starting to get it because, let's face it, the last 15, 20 years, we've put talent development on the back burner. And the leadership development has been withheld to a select few.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, those people who already have the success paradigm working, so they're not listening.
Absolutely.
We have not been giving the coaching and talent development to the people who really, I won't say other people don't need it, but people who will see the most impact from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I think
Yeah.
Hussein chimed in with a comment.
Chimed in here, and I'll share with you. There's a lot. So Hussein, if you don't mind, we'll just speak to it a little bit here. He always has a lot to say. I really love the fact that he's tuning in. He said, although I do not have full knowledge in the ways of working within American companies, from my point of view, the traditional methods are no longer feasible and practical. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes. Following modern management methods through the bridge of permanent communication with subordinates and having something that distinguishes you from others, you can discover the influential points, whether practical or humane. And I think it's possible to achieve a desired achievement. Yes. So in essence, one of the things you're mentioning here, you're saying is what Americans call collaborative leadership. So I'm speaking at the HR Gulf Coast Symposium, and when this podcast airs on the podcast channels, I will have already spoken to the Gulf Coast Symposium, so you'll know how that turns out. But one of my aims is to start to elevate the awareness around what is necessary for the quote-unquote hashtag future of work. What are we looking to evolve into? And making sure that not only does the employee have a better work life, which is important, but also the businesses have more longevity because they're able to provide an environment that helps people thrive, and the people of all cultures and backgrounds.
Yeah, have that conducive environment, have a good open door policy, be collaborative, listen. And I feel like you can be a leader from any seat. You don't necessarily have to have the leadership title in order to lead and manage change effectively. So even though you may be I see an individual contributor, you do have the power to lead because you may be leading your peers, you may be leading, influencing a manager that is coming to you for buy-in. Even though they may or may not give you credit, you just tapped into a leadership ability because someone saw you as relevant to ask your knowledge based on a subject matter expertise that you are well versed in, and that is a form of leadership, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I believe all people are leaders, and all people have vast amounts more impact than they give themselves credit for. I mean, if anybody who's sat still or listened to me long enough knows, I've known to quote this over 20. Now, any introverted person, so someone who is wildly introverted, who loved the isolation during the pandemic, even those people who don't like to leave their home and order their groceries, although I have ordered my groceries, so I can't say that, right? But let's just say some people loved being in isolation. Even that person will influence over 20,000 people in their lifetime. So just imagine how many people you are influencing. And the difference between being an influencer and being toxic is awareness and being intentional, my friends. So Genesis, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up the show today? It's been a great pleasure having you on.
Yeah, I just want to read the synopsis of the back of the book if I can, because I know we touched on it, just so it could kind of just solidify some of my whys.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the cover again for those of you tuning in. Chocolate drop in corporate America, from the pit to the palace. And Aaron, I do want you to think about these two questions and answer after I read them. So, what challenges in the workplace have you encountered that left you feeling as if you were mistreated? Have others who were unqualified seemingly passed you by in the ranks? In our daily lives, we are all faced with various trials. whether in the workforce or at home. However, when treated unfairly, it takes courage to stand and fight for what's right. No matter your race, nationality, ethnicity, or background, you can rise to be the game changer. When you use the power of your voice, you shake the atmosphere and cause a domino effect because others will choose to either follow suit or stand in solidarity. On the pages of Chocolate Drop in corporate America, Genesis has chosen to speak up for not only minorities, but also anyone who has been slighted on the job in any way. From her personal testimony, you will learn how speaking up brought awareness so that long lasting change could be made. We do not win by remaining silent, overlooking injustice, and continuing to practice poor judgment. We win by standing together, engaging in those difficult conversations, and helping one another. Let's work together to create change for future generations to come.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And if you ask me those questions, have I ever been slighted in the workplace? Yes, I have. And because I knew it was a result of my own actions, I was able to correct it or inaction. So,
Mm,
like I mentioned before, you have a lot more impact than you recognize. And you're right, when you use your voice and you are able to show up in your zone of genius 100%, then you're able to get ahead a lot more readily. Genesis, it was a pleasure having you on the show. For those of you tuning in now or later, feel free to reach out with your comments or questions. We welcome them and we will see them on any of the variety of channels we're now live, and this replay is available on either LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. I welcome you to enjoy our future career coffee chat live shows and podcast. Easy for me to say. So until next time, my friends, keep elevating. I'll see you soon.